Today we delve into the beginning of one of the most audacious campaigns in history, Napoleon's campaign in Russia. But to understand the magnitude of this event, we must go back to early 1812, when Europe was already under the shadow of Napoleon's power. This was the time of the so-called Grand Empire, where most European nations were, in one way or another, under the influence of the man who proclaimed himself Emperor of the French. Napoleon dreamed of a unified Europe under his leadership. For him, the concept of empire was not just about territory, but about ideology, order, and stability, of course, on his own terms. Each conquest came with the promise of modernization and organization, and he believed Russia would be just another piece in this grand puzzle. But there was a problem. Alexander I, the Russian Tsar, refused to yield to this vision of imperial unity. While France and Russia had signed the Treaty of Tilsit in 1807, this peace was slowly crumbling. Napoleon knew Alexander was unpredictable, perhaps one of the few men in Europe willing to confront his ambition, and it deeply troubled him. The Tsar was rebelling against the continental system imposed by Napoleon and threatening the trade networks that sustained it. And so Napoleon decided that force was the only answer. In his mind, a swift victory over Alexander would not only consolidate his position but restore order across Europe. He believed that by swiftly crushing the Russian army, the Tsar would be forced to surrender. And with this thought, he began to prepare his greatest work of military strategy, the invasion of Russia. In the months leading up to the invasion, Napoleon mobilized resources never before seen in military history. The so-called Grand Army was not an ordinary army, it was a logistical monster, drawing forces from across Europe. Altogether, there were over 600,000 soldiers. Think about that, 600,000 souls from different nations, cultures, and languages, all united under a single banner. And they didn't come alone. The Grand Army brought with it thousands of horses, hundreds of cannons, and an immense quantity of supplies. This entire infrastructure was planned to sustain the march to Moscow. Napoleon, known for his attention to detail, had studied the routes, set up supply depots, and even assigned engineers to build bridges and improvised roads as the army advanced. He had foreseen everything, or at least he thought he had. To Napoleon, Russia was just another territory to be conquered. He firmly believed that with a decisive victory, he could capture Moscow and subdue the Tsar. After all, he had already defeated powerful armies before. He had crossed mountains and seas, defeated revered generals, and toppled ancient dynasties. But Russia was different. When the time came in June 1812, Napoleon gave the order. With an air of solemnity, he crossed the Niemen River, marking the official start of the invasion. It was a grand moment, a sight that seemed to challenge the very heavens, an endless line of soldiers, uniforms gleaming in the sun, flags fluttering in the wind. It was as if the earth and sky had come together to witness this march. But maybe, deep down, Napoleon had a hesitation. He knew that Russia was vast, inhospitable, and that the Russian winter was legendary in its cruelty. Yet his confidence drove him forward. He believed that if he struck quickly and with full force, he could avoid a confrontation with this merciless winter. He planned to defeat Alexander before the cold even arrived. Thus, the first days were a triumphant advance. The Grand Army marched with little resistance, and Napoleon was convinced his strategy was working. But he would soon realize that the Russians had a very different plan for this war. At first, the strategy seemed simple, but time would reveal Alexander's true game. The Tsar was withdrawing his troops, allowing Napoleon to advance deeper into the country. However, this retreat was not a flight. It was an invitation to something far darker. With each mile they advanced, the French army began to feel the impact of the scorched earth tactic. The Russians, as they withdrew, burned cities, villages, and even crops. When the Grand Army reached a new territory, they found nothing, only ashes and desolation. It was as if Russia itself was becoming a hostile desert, refusing to yield to the invaders. Food grew scarce, morale began to fall, and Napoleon began to understand that perhaps this campaign would not be like the others. Thus begins the true battle. It's not just a fight between armies, but a war against the land itself and against time. And what Napoleon does not yet know is that this triumphant advance will slowly turn into a nightmare, a desperate fight against an invisible, relentless enemy. Want to know what happened when the scorched earth tactic began to show its true impact? In the next episode, we'll reveal how Russia, instead of surrendering, became a trap for the Grand Army. Don't miss it. Every detail uncovers a new layer of this epic conflict and takes us closer to the moment when Napoleon's fate will begin to change.